You had no intention of being an actor, Pamela.
No. I thought actor people had actor children that had actor babies. I just didn't think that was even in the cards for me. I had no idea what that even meant. So I just felt really grateful for every time I had a job. And I thought, I'm just going to go home as soon as this stops. It hasn't stopped.
No. Pamela Anderson, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
How are you?
I'm great. This is my last interview of this big, long press tour, so we saved the best for last.
Save the worst for last.
No.
Did I hear you're on the New York Times bestseller list?
Yes. Number 2.
What do you make of that?
Behind Harry.
Prince Harry.
Prince Harry.
Yeah.
Behind Prince Harry. I'm so excited. I mean, I yesterday, my publisher called me and I was like, oh no, what happened? Why is she calling me? Why is Kate calling me? And she called and she was just in tears. She was so happy for me. She was like, this is really great. So I'm so grateful. I can't believe it.
How has it been doing the press for this thing? Because it's one thing to tell the stories in the book. It's another thing to get asked about them.
Yeah, you kind of think you're off the hook when you write a book and do a documentary. You think, okay, now I've done that, but then you have to do all the press for the book, and you have to retell all the stories, and so it's hard work, but it's definitely rewarding, and it's been very therapeutic for everybody around me.
It's been therapeutic for you, or?
Yes, for me, of course, to kind of go back and revisit those chapters in my life, and kind of put it to rest, and have the documentary just be just complete, 100% just disclosure, full disclosure, and not really having any part of that, just saying, here's the key to my archives, and I know I haven't murdered anybody, so anything other than that, I think I'm pretty good.
Yeah. So
it's been an interesting relief. Now I feel like the whole story is there, so, we kind of need to be kinder to each other, maybe give each other a break sometimes. And when I look at people that are, just even acting out or misdirected anger, I always think, what's their childhood like? We're whole people and not just tidbits of things that we throw together for press headlines.
I mean, you would know that more than most. I mean, you have been one thing that's really clear from this documentary and from this book is how you're talked about. Like how people talk about you, how people talked about you, especially during those kind of big years. So I would understand that you would be like, hey, I'm a full person. I have a story. I am more than just these headlines. I am more than just this narrative. And as you said, I have a childhood. Mm-hmm. How was it? How was your childhood in Ladysmith?
Well, I mean, I had a very adventurous kind of wonderful upbringing. I mean, my upbringing was in nature and at the beach. I mean, I was really, really fortunate. Really fortunate. My parents were madly in love, very young, and they're still together. They're more in love than ever, and they're my heroes. But we have, we all have. Nothing is perfect. No human is perfect, and we all got through it.
Yeah, I should say for people who don't know, there was sort of abuse from your. It's weird to say this.
Babysitter. I know, it's hard to take. It's like,
yeah.
I talk a lot about it in the book. I talk about just different things that I wanted to talk about pivotal moments in my life, and there's definitely more good than bad in my life. But there were moments of that were difficult in my childhood. A babysitter, she molested me when I was, probably about 6 years old, and I wished her dead, and then she died, and it's just a bunch of crazy things that have happened. I just got through it, I think, with my imagination. I still feel like, I don't feel like a victim. I feel like there's things that happen in people's lives and you have to get over them because they accumulate. Something happens to you, then another thing happens, and it kind of compounds.
Yeah.
So it's great to be able to go back and feel those feelings and get through those and not hold, just forgiveness is a big thing.
How does the sharing of it feel? Like, how does we don't have to talk about this too much,
right.
But you're right. There's stories in the beginning about, you were molested by a babysitter, and then, you hope that babysitter dies. She then dies. I can't imagine what that would do to you as a child. Then
a kid thinks that I did it. I thought my magical mind.
And you must have felt guilt, or you must.
I felt guilt. I couldn't tell my parents anything then.
And then also just like, boyfriends who abused you, men who abused you. What does it feel like when you write these down and share them with people?
I think that was the hardest stuff to write but then I feel like the hardest, you dig down for these words and you want to explain it, you want to be honest and you want to go there, and I think, oh God, I can't write that. And then I go, oh no, I have to write that. Now that I've said that I can't write that, that means those words have to be written. Those are the difficult ones. And so I think it's helpful because you can kind of set the stage maybe for somebody else to talk about those things. Because it's not an easy thing to talk about. Sometimes it's easier to write.
Yeah.
I mean, writing about it was one thing, but then having to talk about it now and talk about it in interviews and things, I think is hard too. But I don't want to not go there because it's part of my life, and I've learned how to live with joy, and choosing happiness was always something that I worked on.
I understand. I think what I'm curious about is like when you actually, because you wrote this book yourself, it's important for me to mention that. Like there was no ghostwriter, there was nothing. Very rare.
Yes, very rare. But I was always a writer. I wrote journals my whole life. My journal was my best friend. I've always written.
Your poetry in the book is really beautiful and really kind of stands out at the very beginning. What I'm curious about is when you write these stories, like physically, like when you press the period after you write this story down on a word processor or however you did it, what's the emotion?
Well, if I wrote things down in my journal, I just felt like at least there's proof. I don't know, as a little kid, I always thought there's proof. There's proof that it happened. There's just proof of existence, proof of everything. Writing for me felt like proof of existence. Like I wanted to write down the true story so that if something were to happen to me, I mean, I know it sounds dramatic, but that's always was part of my reason for writing, that I wanted the truth to be out there no matter if something were to happen to me in my life, that these thoughts and emotions and feelings were recorded. I don't know why. I have no idea why. I didn't ever expect to be, and on TV or famous or anything. Even as a child, I felt that. And I felt like I could let it go a little bit. If I wrote it down, then I had to stop thinking about it.
If you wrote it down, something happened and good or bad,
right,
and you wrote it down, it was there for the record. If anything ever happened to you, the story was told.
I know.
It strikes me that you were worried about something happening to you at such a young age,
I don't know what that was, but that was... Journaling, too, was something I did to know what I was feeling. If I wrote something down, I could read it and go, oh, that's how I'm feeling. Because, your head, you're thinking about so many things. But when you're writing, it all makes sense. So that was also an exercise I did, I guess, to kind of figure out how I was feeling. And I always thought poetry I love Pablo Neruda. I'm a big fan of... It's funny, my Pablo Neruda story is funny because I used to read his poems in Spanish, but I don't know Spanish. But I would read it out loud to kind of think what the cadence was, his original words, and I always thought I do that. I do a lot of weird things like that.
Well, you probably get a closer feeling of the way you're supposed to feel from the poems than you would
and then
from
I
the
would read it and go,
them.
I kind of knew what he was saying, even though I didn't know the language, but I love poetry.
There's something to be said about like when you say, I don't know why I thought I wrote all this stuff down. I don't know why I was worried about something happening to me because there was no expectation of it. But someone said this thing to me one time. They said that things that remarkable things, people that remarkable things have happened to, are not comforted by percentages. Essentially, if something very rare has happened to you, you are no longer comforted by, oh, for God's sake, Pamela, 95% of people don't have to deal with that. Because you go, hey, a lot of very strange things have happened to me. You know what I mean?
And I wanted to express how I was feeling about those things. I think that's what was the most important part of writing for me, was that I wanted to find those words, because we rely on such, there's a group of words that we always use, but what are the words that we don't always use? Maybe I can explain this in a way that's going to be more descriptive, more, something different. And I've always felt that even when I was writing, I would write my first thought. I would try to write just very like a lot of streams of consciousness that made no sense. And they usually turned out to be really long poems without putting any thought into it. And then with just kind of writing, it helped me get it out. And then now with a book, I tried to make it balanced. I had to, paragraphs and full sentences and, try and write a book. I worked with an editor. I felt I wanted to kind of touch on things, but be descriptive in those moments and set the stage and kind of almost think of it as a movie or a script or a play. And so I felt really drawn to taking everything that I've learned in my life and try and paint the picture of something that felt like you were maybe sitting at the movies and watching.
Tell me the movie of you getting discovered at the BC Lions game.
Well, I went to a BC Lions game with some neighbors who had free tickets and Labatt's Beer T-shirts. And if we wore the Labatt's Beer T-shirts, we could get in for free. So we all went, and I didn't want to go, but my girlfriend really wanted to go. And we went, and I guess the cameraman zoomed in on me and put me up on the big Jumbotron. And I remember looking up going, "Ooh, I look terrible." Before I realized it was me, I was already judging myself, thinking, I look terrible. And then I went, oh my gosh, that's me up there. And then my friends made me stand up and hold my T-shirt. And they kind of had me going back and forth all night and ended up on Monday Night Football ads. And Labatt's asked me to do a commercial. And then with the gym I was working at a tanning salon at the gym. And they asked me to do their advertising. And then, I was just doing all these crazy things. And I thought, and then Playboy called me because I was listed in the phone book. And I said no. And then
They had seen the Monday Night Football.
Yeah, so this was just all kind of going really fast. And then I decided at one time, because my boyfriend was really jealous and we were just in the middle of a fight, and the phone rang, and it was Marilyn Grabowski from Playboy. And she said, would you like to come down and do a Playboy cover? And I just looked at him and said, Playboy? Sure. And then he threw silverware at me until I could get out the door. It was crazy. Anyway, I ended up going to L.A., my first plane ride.
First plane ride ever.
Yeah, and landed on Gay Pride Day. It was quite a parade. It was just...
What was on your mind on the plane?
I just was looking out at the clouds, and, I was reading a Shirley MacLaine book, Out on a Limb. And so I had that book with me. And I was just looking out at the clouds and then seeing the city coming. And then I remember when we landed, I was like, yay! And no one else was clapping and saying, yay, we landed, we did it. It was just, I was very excited.
It must have been so overwhelming to go from kind of complete anonymity from going to one sports game.
Well, and I was on my own in the plane, and I on my own going to Los Angeles. And then I landed, and it was Gay Pride Day, so we're getting through a parade, and just these beautiful people everywhere. It's just eye candy. It just was like an explosion of bright colors. And then to get to my hotel, and then I remember thinking, can I use the phone? I didn't know what room service was. I ended up going to it was the Russian tea room, actually, at the Bellage at that time. I remember seeing Shirley MacLaine in the restaurant. The
person whose book you were just reading.
I had the book.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was staring at her a bit too long, and then she glared at me, and I was scared. That Shirley MacLaine kind of glare. I guess I was looking at her too long. But it was just one thing after another after that.
When you pose for Playboy, you can tell from the documentary and from the book that something changes in you.
When? Which time?
The first time.
When I did Playboy?
Yeah.
Well, I was extremely shy, if anyone can believe that. I was painfully shy. I actually felt paralyzed by it. And I was doing this as a leap of faith. I thought, if somebody else can do it, I can do it. But I was just shaking. And I remember the first roll of film. I was covered. I wasn't nude at all, but I was nude underneath the jacket. And it was only one roll of film because I actually physically got sick. I was so nervous. But I just remember thinking, let's do this. And I really felt like I was falling off a cliff. And I just kind of let myself go and opened my eyes to the first flash. And bam, there I was, shooting, to the side, smiling, all this kind of stuff. And it was really a leap of faith, and I think that's where I kind of took my power back. I felt empowered by it. I felt like a woman. I felt like I had claimed my sensuality, my sexuality, that this was my body, and I was in control.
That people had, my understanding of that is that people had tried to take that from you or tried to own you, own your body, own your sexuality, and then that's what you mean by take it back?
Well, this with the times where I felt abused,
Okay.
I was, taken advantage of when I was a young teenager, and again with a boyfriend and his friends, and I felt really shut down, and that was, I think, what the shyness was. I felt really confused. And, I tell this to people, too, and I work a lot with the National Domestic Violence Hotline. My foundation supports them, and we talk a lot about abuse and how it's something that's taken away from you, and I feel like I just really felt empowered for once. I still wanted to be a sensual, sexy woman, but I had no idea how to be that without people thinking of me differently. I really felt when I was, at 12 years old, when an older man raped me, I felt like it was imprinted on my forehead. As much as I didn't want to tell anybody, I felt like everybody knew, and I was so ashamed. And then it was just a very confusing time for me. And really everything came together when I made the choice to be in Playboy, and I felt, at the Playboy mansion, and just how things kind of.
Yeah.
I felt safe there.
Yeah.
I mean, people think that's crazy, but actually I knew when I was there that people were looking out for me, and that's when a lot changed then.
I mean, and everything changed. I mean, it's from Playboy that you then are cast in, I think it's Married with Children, and then Home Improvement, and then Baywatch. And Baywatch gets watched by 1.1 billion people. It's unbelievable.
They're still streaming Baywatch. It's crazy.
How do you go, like, do you remember the call that, like, we're going to do this show about lifeguards and we want you to be a part of it? Or Playboy gets the call, right?
People were calling Playboy. I think I saw on something lately, someone said they tried to get me to go there 12 times, but I thought Marina Del Rey seemed very exotic and very far away, and I wasn't going to drive there myself. And so at some point I ended up going with a boyfriend, David Charvet, actually, and they ended up hiring both of us.
You had no intention of being an actor, Pamela.
No. I thought actor people had actor children that had actor babies. I just didn't think that was even in the cards for me. I had no idea what that even meant. So I just felt really grateful for every time I had a job. And I thought, I'm just going to go home as soon as this stops. It hasn't stopped.
No. Like the fame, you thought the fame was going to go away very quickly.
Well, I thought, if I don't get another job, it just kept on going, one thing after another. And then, of course, I got married and had babies, and that there's all of that story. But it's quite a wild ride. But it's nice to be home. It's nice to be home. I came full circle. I knew I was going to end up back in Ladysmith at some point.
I want to talk just a little bit about that wild ride, but I don't want to necessarily get into the details of it.
Okay.
So the fame, very famously, most people's proposal stories aren't famous, but very famously, when you meet Tommy Lee, you know each other for 4 days, and you get married, and then it's complicated after that. I think when I was reading the book that there were moments where I said she could write about this relationship. It's none of my business, but you could write about that relationship in a way that is tinged with anger and regret. But when I read it, there's a lot of love and joy for that time. Can you talk to me about that?
I think when my kids were small, that was my favorite time, when we were all together. Because that's all I ever wanted was a family and kids, and to look after somebody and to have that kind of heightened sense of romance. I mean, coming in as your knight in shining armor, literally.
He wore a night outfit.
I mean, we weren't able to use some of the footage of a birthday party I threw for him, which was quite wild. I had the Mad Hatter hat on, and it was insane. It was insane. He was a clown. We came on a tour bus with all the little people rolling out the red carpet, and Cirque du Soleil performers, a Ferris wheel, circus mirrors in the bathroom.
Just like the birthday parties in Ladysmith.
Everyone dressed with the appetizers hanging off their bikinis. I mean, it was just wild. Everything I could dream up, I did.
Yeah.
And we had a great time. And so sometimes I think that kind of romantic love might not be sustainable. And with all the mythology and fairy tales and everything I've read, and in psychology behind mythology, they do say romantic love is unsustainable. But so that means that was that, and I appreciate it. And I'm really happy where I'm at right now. The capacity to be alone is the capacity to love, that great Osho quote. And so that's what I'm working on.
I just want another question about that time, and my question is about the way you write about it, is that you never say sex tape, you only say the tape.
Stolen property. Home movies that were spliced together.
Home
there
movies.
was never a tape made for distribution or a sex tape. It was home movies they spliced together, because Tommy and I were naked all the time. I mean, we were just crazy, two people in love.
Home movies of private sex with your husband that were stolen from you?
Well, I mean, private. It was just us naked on holidays, and maybe there was one tiny little part that was more sexual, but it was more spliced together to look like we made something. I still haven't seen it, so I'm not quite sure what it is.
Sure. I mean, the footage in the documentaries is one of a lot of love. What happens when that incredibly traumatic thing is made into kind of entertainment? There was that TV show, the Pam and Tommy TV show, which I know you haven't seen.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me, to be honest with you, because when I first heard about it, okay, they're going to make a dramatization of this time in Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee's life. But don't worry, they said. It's going to be about, the tremendous atrocities done to Pamela Anderson. It's going to be about her kind of goodness. And then quickly afterwards, I read, but Pamela Anderson doesn't want anything to do with this.
I never had anything to do with it, and neither did Tommy. So it felt silly and superficial and shallow and rude. And I always get concerned for my kids. We've all gone through a lot together, and we get through things as they come, and we've always been very open and honest about all the things in our life. But I didn't really want that to come out. I thought that was silly. But I was already in the process of doing a documentary and writing my book, so it kind of all happened for the fact that I get to tell my own story makes it feel better.
Yeah, it felt salient that you had this documentary coming out, that people were purporting to tell your story for you, and that you were able to go like, actually, no.
This is how it really happened.
I'm going to tell it. And then your boys are such a big part of it.
Yeah.
How old are they now?
26. Brandon's 26 and Dylan's 25.
And you say they really support you. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, they support me completely. They said, Mom, it's time you tell your story. So they really supported me with the book. Brandon is very much a part of the business, the family business. And he made these deals, this book deal and the Netflix deal. So I was like, okay, I work for you. This is great. And he said, he just really wanted to show his mom, and he felt like I hadn't been seen, and this was a great opportunity to do that it was time. He likes to say, before I'm too old. Okay.
Who's he? He's too old or you're too old?
No, Brandon said, before I'm too old, let's do this now while you still have such a huge life ahead of you.
What do you mean when he says they feel like you've never been seen?
Well, because they're young, and they see more than I do when it comes to these kind of things, and they just thought that it'd be nice to be able to tell the full story. And they weren't even really aware of the full story. I mean, the gritty, gory details, but they knew I'm strong for a reason, that I have this kind of philosophical way of even parenting, that they kind of were just curious too. And just like Brandon said, a lot of this was putting pieces of his life back together, or seeing his life unfold in reverse, he likes to say. And Dylan and Brandon, we're all very close, and it's been very freeing to know that it's done. It's done. Now I can move on.
When you say you have these sort of philosophical approaches to your life, I'm struck by something you said at the very beginning that I wanted to follow up on. You said, Tom, I'm not a victim. Mm-hmm. That I've heard you say that a few times. That feels important for you to say. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I feel like this weaponized empathy is a thing. I think that
weaponized empathy?
Yeah, I don't feel like sorry for somebody is effective. I think that just like that's just what happened, and now we can move on and be better people, and people's stories can inspire us to be better people and good and kind, and what I do each day is just try not to hurt anybody. And I think that's a real simple almost rebellious kind of rebel move, is to be happy in spite of everything, anything.
Yeah. That kindness and compassion, unconditionally, and joy unconditionally, are like incredibly powerful things, and kind of radical things in some ways, right?
Yeah, and you have to be, strong and tough, and life is hard for everybody. Yeah. And so let's be good to each other.
I love that idea of weaponized empathy. The idea that when people will say, "Oh, well, Pam, your private property was stolen from you, or you had to go through this, or you had to go through that," like they "Oh, I'm so sorry for you," but are they? And is that a genuine emotion? Is that what you mean by weaponized empathy?
Well, I just feel like life is hard for everybody, and you can be inspired by someone's story and empowered by them, but I don't think It's not, when you tell your story, you're not necessarily looking for sympathy. You're just telling your story.
Very zen of you.
Is that Zen? I don't know what it is. I say weird stuff sometimes. I don't even know where it comes from.
It's like this idea. I mean, I think about this all the time. Is that like the goal is to just be a boat on the water,
Oh,
to not be above and not be up in the waves or not be underneath, but just to be on the water.
we're all in the soup together.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What made you move home to Canada?
Oh, I always knew I was going to move home to Canada. I wanted to be closer to my parents, too, in their elder years. I've moved them onto my property. They have their own house, their own cabin, so it's enough space. We're not on top of each other. We have 5 dogs and a huge, beautiful vegetable garden, rose garden, and that's my favorite place. It's the heart of the property, and my mom and I like to garden together, and it's really a bonding experience, and I've been all over the world. It's the most beautiful place in the world. Vancouver Island is a rainforest. I mean, there's so much to do there and so much I can do there. There's a lot of activism too. There's a lot of, I like that. I love it. I love the Indigenous communities that I work with. And it's full of life, and it's just my favorite place.
People would talk about, and I can relate to this, the idea that when you go home to the place that you're from, you feel like a different person. Do you feel like a different person?
I feel exactly the same way I did as I was 5 years old, running through the same trees. I like to say the trees have known me since birth. They're the same trees. And I have this beautiful property, and I remember running on the beach when I was, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, running up to my grandma's house, which I own now, and getting popsicles and chocolate bars and giving them to all my friends, having a tab I'd like to run up. It's interesting. I feel like my dad said, because I've renovated everything, but I didn't redo the floors, so my dad said the only thing the same about this house is that the squeaks are in the same spots when he walks through his house, where his childhood home.
When did you first decide to go back?
I was in France, and COVID hit, and I thought, I need to go home. I went home. None of us knew how long we were going to be home. And I started just renovating, construction, painting, planting, started weeding my garden, and started to reflect on my whole life. I mean, it was very, going back home is harder than it looks.
What do you mean?
Well, just going home to retracing the steps of my childhood, which weren't always easy.
Yeah.
So it was very therapeutic, and also people have kind of moved on, stuffed those feelings down, and I think even for my parents, it can be really annoying having a famous daughter, but it's a balance, because we do have the beautiful home, and I still have the property, and I'm able to maintain it and keep it for all of us. So there's good and bad with having a famous daughter.
I never thought about that.
I wrote a book, so that's something, is not easy on everybody, because especially my mom, it's kind of tested our relationship a lot, because she's found her way to kind of get through her life, her childhood, her marriage, her thing, and now to have it public is hard, because it's readdressing everything and it's bringing things up. But I feel like this was my purpose. This was my purpose on earth.
Yeah.
The reason I went through everything, so I can write about it, and that maybe someone can be helped by it too.
But you know what it's like with the older generations. They can be like, oh, sure, yeah, I went through hard things. But that's it. You move on, you pick yourself up.
Sorry, I'm Stir the Pot Pam. That's what they call me.
But the younger generation, of which we are a part of, we're more willing to investigate and to question why.
You know what? Stress and that kind of stuffing stuff down causes disease.
Yeah.
I want my mom to be able to work through this with therapists and with me and with both of us together, and kind of cut that lineage, that generational, that female thing that we do, that walking on eggshells thing. It's like, let's not do that anymore. Let's just be honest. Let's just be open and honest about everything, and not die of some terrible disease from stress.
Yeah.
So it's hard work, but it's rewarding.
I mean, you would be forgiven, and you're gonna want to stop me halfway through this, but you would be forgiven, I think, if the way that you looked at the world after. Because in some ways, the story of this book and the story of this documentary, to me, it's so weird talking to you.
Sorry.
It's just weird talking to you, because you're so famous to me,
Oh, gosh.
When I was growing up, And I realized watching this documentary, to be honest with you, and I realized reading this book, that you were a name, and you were a photo, and you were a role on a TV show, almost more than anyone else I've met. you were a story, you were a joke on a late night show, to watch you take back and go, hey, I'm not kidding around.
No.
Like, to say I was a real person the entire time.
The entire time, yes. Yeah.
And to not write a book that's filled with, and to live a life that's filled with bitterness, but is filled with like a tremendous amount of love for people is unbelievable to me. Where does that come from?
Survival. It's a choice that I've made. I've always been a big reader, and everything. I'm an insatiable learner. I like to learn, so I studied a lot of psychology very early on. My Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, one of the first books I read by Carl Jung. It's not an easy read to be like diving into it all. And I just believe in
psychology.
So I know it's crazy, right? When I was a teenager, and
Yeah.
I was just devouring this and thinking alchemy and Marie-Louise von Franz and devotion fairy tales, Robert Bly, Iron John. Every single Bullfinch's mythology. I was just sucking it all in, and I realized I could paint the picture of my own life, and that life isn't easy. It's what you do with these. Whatever happens to you, not what happens to you. It's just I don't know. I just thought, why not love somebody in spite of it all? You can't change people. You can only love them.
Beautiful. What does it feel like when you take your story back?
I feel great because I'm talking about the stuff that I care about. Like right now, you're asking me questions about what I care about instead of my boyfriends and my boobs. That's kind of what it always was.
Yeah.
And I was like, but these are the things I talk about with really close friends and my kids and my kids have always like, I would send them emails. They're like, Mom, if you're going to write a book, can you please write something that people are going to understand? Like you're always like, sometimes it's just a lot. So anyway.
Hold on, you're saying that sometimes you will go on about stuff and your kids don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I go off on tangents, and it just it goes into poetry. I could talk about authors I've just read, or politics, or activism, or Julian Assange, or things. I just kind of go all over the place, and I don't even know where I started or where I ended. But it's this. It comes from the same place. It comes from my heart.
But I still don't feel like I got an answer to the question.
Oh.
What happens when you've lived a life when some other people have told your story, have profited from your story, and you are taking your own story back? What does that feel like?
Well, it's empowering. It's just natural. Like I kind of knew this was going to happen at some point. I didn't know who was going to be listening or if anybody would care. But I'm just really grateful that I've been able to tell my story. It's been the weight of the world off my shoulders, maybe.
Well, thanks for talking to me at the tail end of this crazy press run you've been on, Pam.
Yeah. I'm going to do more book signings, though. The best part of all of this was book signings, meeting people one-on-one. People are pouring their hearts out to me, and I feel like it's great.
What's the most surprising thing someone has said to you at one of these signings?
Well, someone said to me, that they hadn't talked to their mother in a really long time, but after reading my book, they called and reconnected with their family and decided not to be bitter, but to be more loving and to think about people's pasts. And I don't know, it's just really incredible. I see a lot of tears, a lot of young girls saying, this has really helped me a lot. And I feel empowered by what I've gone through. So it feels good. It feels like I'm onto something. It feels really great.
I hope you can feel in the room when you were walking in here, just how much love people feel for you.
I appreciate it. No, I feel rooted for. I feel this is a great time for me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.